Welcome to the Nathan's Ark Challenge. I guess I should start from the beginning, as far as what led me to want to write this story, and also what I hope to accomplish. I was watching a debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye, and Ken Ham said there was a bias against theism in regards to science. Well, I decided to do something that would attempt to argue against that point. I figured that in the Bible, or for that matter throughout the Bible, there are arguments against the stories being literal, and for them being figurative, being that the ones that argue against the literal interpretation of the Bible are mostly in the biology field. I decided to pick a story that I knew dealt with biology, or rather animals, the most. Of course, the logical choice was Noah's Ark. It is filled with references to elephants, geese, lions, zebras, etc., etc. Then I began to realize a few things about the story when it came to Noah's Ark and people who argued against it being an historical event. Nobody ever brought up religion. You never see a "why would a loving God do this?" argument against Noah. The question is why and if there is a bias against theism. You would think there would be statements made like this. Well, it seems there are three main reasons why I think this never happens. First, the people who bring up the purely scientific arguments are arguing against the story being taught in a public school. In other words, Noah's Ark in church is not a big deal, but in school, that's where people get upset. The second argument for being purely scientific is because you can't complain about suffering that you don't think happened in the first place if you feel the event is not a literal event, complaining about the people who died. In the flood is like complaining about Krypton blowing up in Superman. The third reason is creationism is a scientific issue, not a religious one, even though people try to make it religious. So, since we have established that it makes no sense to go after Noah's Ark with a religious argument, I decided to try something to kind of prove a point about science, not religion, being the issue. If I were to write a story where we make it exactly like Noah's Ark, but one, change the names of the people in the story, and two, make it humanistic. In other words, nobody in the story is doing anything because of a religious vision or religious beliefs. I called this story Nathan's Ark. Then, if I were to take this story and show it to someone with a scientific mind, and I asked them what they thought of the story, would the objections, or rather the scientific objections to the story, be the same? It turns out that's exactly what happened. The objections were exactly the same story, same problems. Now you may be wondering what this is going to accomplish. And yes, I will show you the Nathan's Ark story, if the scientist says the same thing. What does the young Earth creationist say? Remember, these people maintain that Noah's Ark happened. I have researched and found as many as 100 scientific, historical, and logical objections that can be applied to both the story of Noah and Nathan. If the young Earth creationist maintains that Noah happened, they are maintaining that Noah can be found to show that the 100 objections are moot. But wouldn't this also be the case, Nathan? In other words, how do you argue for Noah, but state that Nathan never happened? In other words, the young Earth creationist has painted himself into a corner. They either accept the fact there are two stories now that are of equal value and plausibility. Every time anyone brings up the story of Noah, the story of Nathan can be brought up 2 seconds later. Or they have to take both stories and throw them both in the trash as literal historical events. Without further delay, here is the story of Nathan's Ark. Nathan was a scientist who was highly knowledgeable and well regarded in his scientific community. He had 3 sons, Sheldo, Henry, and Jack. The Earth was experiencing widespread social and environmental issues due to unsustainable human activities. Nathan observed the extensive impact these activities had on our planet. Using his scientific expertise, Nathan predicted an impending flood that posed a threat to life on Earth. To withstand this catastrophe, he decided to construct a large vessel, or ark, of cypress wood, creating rooms coated with pitch inside and out. The ark needed to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Nathan planned to build a roof with an opening 1 cubit high all around. He included a door on the side of the ark and designed lower, middle, and upper decks. Based on his scientific models, Nathan foresaw that floodwaters could lead to widespread devastation of terrestrial life. Thus, he decided to protect his family by constructing this vessel. Nathan gathered 2 of every kind of living creature, male and female, representing various species to ensure biodiversity conservation. 2 of every kind of bird, animal, and ground creature were also to be taken. He also realized the need to store every kind of food that could sustain both his family and the animals. Following his scientific plan, Nathan made provisions for sustainable diversity by gathering 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, and 7 pairs of every kind of bird. He predicted that after 7 days, intense rain would last for 40 days and nights, posing a major threat to life on the planet. Nathan and his family entered the ark to escape the impending disaster, along with pairs of clean and unclean animals and birds, consistent with his careful planning. 7 days later, the floodwaters began to fall. On the 17th day of the 2nd month of Nathan's 600th year, natural geological activities unleashed massive flooding, accompanied by intense rainfall for 40 days and nights. On that day, Nathan, his family, and all the necessary living creatures entered the ark. They included every wild animal, livestock, and bird as planned. For 40 days, the flooding escalated, lifting the ark above the earth as waters submerged even the highest mountains. Many species unfortunately faced extinction. However, Nathan and all those with him in the ark remained safe. The waters continued for 150 days, but as predicted by Nathan's calculations, natural processes began to reverse. A strong wind began to help the waters recede. Over time, on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat, and the waters continued to diminish. After 40 days, Nathan released a raven, observing its flight until the water receded. He then sent a dove to assess conditions, realizing gradual improvement when it returned with an olive leaf after a week. On the 1st day of Nathan's 601st year, the ground appeared dry. Based on his predictions, Nathan decided to release all the creatures from the ark to restore ecological balance on Earth. He and his family stepped out, followed by all the living creatures, one kind after another. Reflecting on the event, Nathan realized people must focus on sustainable growth and coexistence with nature. Encouraging harmony with the environment, Nathan declared the need for responsible stewardship of all life. Whenever Nathan observed a rainbow after the flood, he saw it as a natural phenomenon, confirming the predictive accuracy of his scientific endeavors and symbolizing hope for a renewed commitment to environmental awareness. Nathan and his sons reached a consensus that, based on informed environmental management, such a flood might not recur if humanity learned from past mistakes. The rainbow now reminded Nathan and others of the importance of utilizing scientific knowledge to protect and preserve our world for future generations. The challenge is simple object to the above story, without arguing against Noah's ark in the process.